Hello everyone! Hades 2 released into early access recently, and I wanted to compose a video sharing some of my thoughts on it so far. This review will not contain any spoilers for the story or characters of Hades 2, which aren't final anyway, but I will go into some of the core mechanics at play and how the game feels different from its predecessor. For the unfamiliar, Hades 2 is an action/roguelite by Supergiant Games. You play as Melinoe, daughter of the Greek god of the underworld Hades. In each run, you progress through a series of rooms full of enemies, fighting them in real-time action combat from a top-down 2D perspective. If you perish along your journey, you must start again at the beginning, and you'll get different enemies and different rewards on each attempt. After each room, you get a reward, either a boon from an Olympian god, which will modify one of your existing abilities, or resources that are used to provide permanent upgrades to Melinoe between runs. In the context of roguelite games, we call this meta progression, getting benefits from one run that apply to another. Hades 1 had all sorts of this kind of meta progression, and it seems like Hades 2 might contain even more so. However, I think Supergiant executes this kind of progression very well, and the player's constant escalation of power is paired with a customizable difficulty system, which we called Heat in Hades 1 and now Fear in Hades 2, which means that you're free to choose exactly how difficult the game is and how precisely this difficulty manifests. Combat in Hades 2 definitely has a different feel than the game's predecessor. Hades 1 had extremely fast-paced combat, with Zagreus dashing in and out of enemy attacks with impunity. By comparison, Hades 2 feels a bit more slow-paced and methodical. Zagreus' double dash from Hades 1 is replaced with a single slower dash in Hades 2, as well as a sprint by holding down the dash button, allowing Melinoe to outrun opponents and large attacks. I think Supergiant has created a character that feels suitably witch-like, with combat focusing on staying out of enemy reach, ensnaring them with debuff effects, and then raining hell on them from afar with powerful area effects. The gameplay in Hades 2 definitely reminds me of caster or magic users from other games. Took a little bit of getting used to, but I've come to quite like the way the game plays. It's just as fun and satisfying as the first game. In terms of the atmosphere and storytelling, Supergiant have absolutely nailed the feeling of their first game. The environments are gorgeous, the art and voice acting have been done spectacularly, and Darren Korb's work on the soundtrack is, as usual, an absolute jam. Notably missing compared to the first game is a sense of sarcastic humor. Zagreus always had a sardonic comment for each situation, but Melinoe takes a more straightforward, determined attitude, and nobody else in Hades 2 seems willing to step into the role of comedic relief. So far, the character interactions seem like one of the weaker parts of the game, but I also anticipate that this could change significantly over the development of the game. Hades 2 is in early access. That means the developers have not yet finished making the game, but they are selling access to the current state of the game so that people can enjoy it now and so that they can gather feedback. At this time, I would say that Hades 2 feels like 80 to 90% of a complete game, which is a lot more than was present for the initial early access release of Hades 1. There are some characters who lack art or models, as well as some boons and trinkets that have placeholder icons, but there's already enough content in the base game to match Hades 1. You can progress through a full run featuring 4 major boss battles, along with a fully functional unlock system for difficulties, weapon aspects, and character progression. There's 5 weapons that you can play with, having 3 aspects or variations each, and with a 6th weapon confirmed to be in the final release. The weapons have quite a bit of variety to them as well, with a good mixture of ranged attacks, up-close attacks, slow and fast, such that no matter what your playstyle is, you're likely to be able to find something that fits you. So, should you pick up Hades 2? If you're looking for the story progression of the first game and want to be able to see Melinoe reach the end of her journey, then you should definitely wait. The story of Hades 2 is not finished, and the game does not have a lot to offer beyond the replayable action loop and boon collecting. But if what you want is a replayable, satisfying action loop where you collect boons to make a build and fight bosses, stack difficulty modifiers to keep up the challenge as you improve in the game, all of that is already here and already functioning. Supergiant will undoubtedly fine-tune their mechanics and polish out the rough spots, but the core of this action game isn't likely to change from now until release too much. If you're the type who's already put 500 hours into Hades 1, then absolutely pick this up and give it a go. If you haven't played Hades 1, then stop what you're doing and go do that. It's a more complete game, it's a very awesome game, and you can probably pick it up on sale for a pretty good price too. I would say the biggest reason to get Hades 2 now would be to be an active part of the game's development cycle. Supergiant Games listen to feedback from their players on their official Discord, and if you want to help shape the game, try it out and tell the developers what you think. If you want to see more of Hades 2, including the game's current final boss, then check out my runs of the game on the Baalorlord unedited channel. I plan to make more content when the game reaches a full release date as well, likely sometime in 2025 or 2026. Overall, the game's in a pretty good state. Like I said, surprisingly good for an initial early access release. Overall, I'd rate it probably about 8 out of 10 in its current state, with the previous game being a 9 or maybe a 9.5 out of 10 for the full and complete game. And I do anticipate that Hades 2 will only get better over the course of its development cycle. Hopefully this gives you enough information to work with, deciding whether you should try Hades 2 yourself or wait for it. In either case, thank you so much for watching this brief review of Hades 2's early access.